Chapter 091, Emiliano's Pove. As I hurried through the dimly lit hallways of the Montoya estate, I could feel my heart racing. My thoughts were a tornado of anger and betrayal, and every step I took reverberated in the quiet. I could still hear my father's words in my mind, accusing, icy, and sharp. He had accused me of failing my family and called me weak. Then my mate's covert alliance with Malik Blackthorn struck me like a knife that would never go away. However, I had to control my emotions now. I couldn't allow anything to divert me from my responsibility as Beta. I needed to concentrate. I was responsible for the Montoya pack, and regardless of the past, I couldn't allow my emotions to interfere with my work. As I walked through the estate, the burden of the previous few days weighed heavily on me. Grief and regrets were out of the question. The Underworld Council was still out there. The packs were tense, and something didn't feel right. We couldn't afford to be betrayed again. My eyes landed on a tiny, crumpled piece of paper, and I froze. It was barely noticeable, tucked under a loose stone in the hallway. The edges of the paper were worn, as if they had been handled too often, and my fingers trembled as I picked it up. It was a map pointing straight to a meeting room below ground. I didn't have to second-guess myself. I had to take this lead. I moved slowly but deliberately through the estate while holding the map firmly in my hand. I couldn't go back now, but the hallways felt endless, as though the walls were closing in on me. Not with this new puzzle piece. I came to a secret doorway that I had never seen before, close to the old library. I paused as the gravity of the situation set in. What if I was mistaken? What if this was merely a coincidence? However, I had a feeling that wasn't the case. I stepped into a dim, cramped hallway as the door creaked open. The smell of damp earth and something darker permeated the air. I heard a low murmur. I wasn't by myself. I took care not to make any noise as I stepped closer. With every step, my heart pounded louder in my throat. I came to a complete stop when I finally got to the end of the passage. There was a crowd of people in the center of a poorly lit room. The hushed tones of several pack members' voices made my blood run cold. My best friend Mateo, the one person I believed I could trust the most, was the one face in the crowd that made me freeze. There he was, conversing with the adversary. As I watched Mateo converse in whispers with a shadow-clad figure, my breath caught in my throat. They were talking about plans to support the rogue forces internally. My mind reeled. This isn't possible. One of us was meant to be Mateo. I needed to know more. I had to confront him. I took a step forward, but my weight made the floor creak. It was a faint but sufficient sound. Mateo's eyes met mine as his head jerked up. "Emiliano," he said in a composed yet tense tone. He appeared unsurprised to see me. He almost looked as though he was expecting me. I felt my fists clench, the heat of anger rising in my chest. "You've been working with them?" The words tasted like poison on my tongue, and I spat. Mateo gave me an unreadable look. "Listen, Emiliano, it's not what you believe. I had no other option. I was not interested in hearing it. It felt like everything was falling apart on me. The lies, the betrayal." I walked over to him, my voice hardly controlled. "What do you mean by no choice? You're with them now after lying to us all? Please allow me to explain." "No," I broke off, my rage erupting. "You are a traitor. How could you harm the pack like this?" Mateo's expression twisted in agony. "You're not getting it. My family is with the Underworld Council. I had no other option." I went cold. His remarks struck me like a blow to the body. "What?" My voice was hoarse as I whispered. Mateo's voice cracked as he said, "I didn't want to do this. However, they assured me that if I assisted them, they wouldn't harm my family. I swear I never intended for it to get this far." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had to pay attention to what he was saying. Mateo wasn't the type to abandon the pack without cause. However, the fact that he had done it remained unchanged. "So why didn't you tell me?" My voice was hardly audible as I asked, "Why didn't you come to me because you didn't trust me enough?" Mateo started, but a loud roar that shook the estate interrupted him. I could hear the distant sounds of chaos as the ground shook beneath us. They were attacking the pack. Mateo's gaze expanded. With his eyes darting to the door, he said urgently, "We have to go." I was immobile. I was unable to think clearly. "How about you?" My voice trembled as I asked. With regret in his eyes, he answered, I'll do what I can. But you have to stop this. You have to stop them. Mateo turned and vanished into the darkness before I could react, leaving me standing there, caught between loyalty and treachery. My thoughts were racing, but I didn't have time to think about it. I had to do something. The Underworld Council was moving in, and the estate was being attacked. With my heart pounding in my chest, I dashed back to the main hall. Now what would I do? Who could I trust? Was Mateo merely a pawn in a much larger scheme, or was he truly a traitor? I had to find out, even though I didn't know the answer, for the group, for my household, for Mateo, too. Chaos broke out all around me as soon as I arrived at the front gates. Although the pack was retaliating, it was obvious that the conflict had only just started. Now, who were we actually facing? What would be the extent of the betrayal? I had to keep the pack together, not right now, not after all that we had endured. But could I prevent the Underworld Council from acting before it was too late? And would I ever know for sure whether Mateo was on our side? As the conflict continued, the questions remained unanswered. What if this was only the start of a war we couldn't defeat? Would we make it? Chapter 092, Ronaldo's Pove. I held my sword more firmly than before as I stood at the front. I shivered from the tension and the fear of what lay ahead, not from the cold wind that nipped at my skin. Every fiber in my body cried out that the Underworld Council was closer than ever to releasing everything they possessed, and they had already made their mark on our territories. However, I wasn't just nervous around the council. The one thing that could undo everything I've battled for was the division within my own pack. The pack was disintegrating. It was the rifts in our unity that were becoming apparent, not just the internal betrayal or the persistent fear of an invisible foe. Even though the rogue wolves had been vanquished, we were still in danger. It was similar to the quiet before the storm. As I looked over the horizon, my heart was racing. The battle had not yet ended, by no means. Then it struck. From the woods beyond came a sudden roar, and then the thundering of hooves. When I recognized what it was, the rogue wolves, and saw that they were better organized than ever, my heart fell. "They've arrived!" Behind me, someone yelled in a panicked tone. I didn't have to listen to it again. I was already on the move, giving my men orders. "Get in shape! We will not allow them to pass us by." I realized this wasn't a random attack, as the first wave of rogue wolves smashed into our front lines. This had a strategic component. It was too perfect, too well-timed. They weren't merely there to fight. They were attempting to destroy us from the inside out. I also knew who was responsible. The Council of the Underworld. As usual, they were pulling the strings. I rushed forward, my blade cutting through the air, blocking attacks, and taking down enemies one by one. However, I wasn't totally focused on the battle. I kept thinking about the prophecy every second. The prophecy connected to my relationship with Valeria that I had recently learned about. Could this be the key to everything? Was this ancient fate connected in any way to this war and all of this destruction? "Ronaldo!" I was brought back to the present by a shout from one of my men. "Be careful." A rogue wolf lunged at me with its teeth bared before I could even react. The wolf fell to the ground as I swung my sword in time, but there was no time to rejoice. Here was the rogue wolf leader. He wasn't by himself either. Out of the tree shadows stepped a shadowy figure. The dark magic swirled around him like a storm, and his eyes glowed red. The rogue wolves' leader advanced, his smile contorted with ill intent. "I see you're still alive, Vargas," he said in a mocking, icy tone. I balled my fists around my sword. "You ought to have avoided it. Today marks the end of this." The rogue leader's eyes glistened with laughter. "You believe that today is the last day?" "No, Ronaldo. This is only the beginning. In a much larger game, you and your small pack are merely pawns." I rushed forward, but before I could get to him, I was struck by a burst of evil energy and fell to the ground. With his dark laughter resonating in the air, the renegade leader took a step closer. "Vargas, you see, the Underworld Council has big plans for you. Additionally, for your beloved Valeria." The mere mention of her name made my stomach turn. My thoughts were racing. What was he trying to say? With Valeria, what did they want? The rogue leader raised his hand before I could say anything more, and the ground shook beneath us. I sensed the energy attempting to rip me apart, the pull of dark magic. The renegade leader sneered, "I'm not done yet. You believe you can stop me? Valeria and you are merely parts of a much bigger prophecy, a centuries-old prophecy, and there's no getting around it." The world seemed to be spinning as I made an effort to ignore the pain. I could hardly hear the sounds of battle around me because my vision was blurry. The renegade leader then spoke once more, this time in a chilly, hateful tone. His smile widened as he said, "Valeria's bond with you is the key to everything. We'll break you if we break that bond. Your pack will also fall." My heart stopped. No, I couldn't allow that to occur. They couldn't take Valeria away from me. However, the rogue leader's magic grew stronger as I fought to stand up, and a web of evil energy emerged, encircling Valeria in the distance. No. My voice was raw with panic as I yelled. She was stuck. I couldn't allow them to prevail. Not in this manner. Not by stealing the one person who was most important to me. With every instinct urging me to defend Valeria, I forced myself to stand up against the evil magic. I ignored the pain and everything but the necessity of saving her as I ran in her direction. When I got to her, I used all the strength I had left to cut through the dark magic, and she fell into my arms. Her voice was weak as she whispered, "Reinaldo, stay with me," I said in a raspy voice. I couldn't let her go. Not right now. Not after all that we had endured. However, the rogue leader's voice reverberated through the confusion just as I believed we were safe. He remarked, "You've just postponed the inevitable. The prophecy will still be fulfilled. You two will no longer be connected, and the world will fall apart when it does." My anger grew as I turned to face him. "We'll fight until the very end. You're not going to prevail." The rebellious leader, however, merely grinned. "You believe you can prevent it? Not just your relationship with Valeria is in jeopardy. This prophecy holds the key to the future of all the werewolves in your pack. You underestimate its size, and you are powerless to stop it." My head whirled. What was meant by that? Which prophecy? What topic was the renegade leader discussing? With my heart racing, I glanced down at Valeria. Everything was bearing down on me, including the prophecy and the weight of the battle. For us, what did this mean? What did it signify for the pack's future? I kept thinking about what the rogue leader had said. We needed to understand the meaning of this prophecy, and before it destroyed us all, we had to put an end to it. However, how? Would we make it through this invisible conflict? Could we possibly save the pack from what was about to happen? As the renegade leader vanished into the darkness, leaving us only to speculate about what might happen next, the questions raged in my head, unanswered. What was the true meaning of this prophecy? To stop it, how far would we have to go? Chapter 93. Valeria's POV. It was nearly oppressive how quiet my rooms were. My mind was jumbled as I sat by the window and watched the moonlight pour into the space. I felt the weight of everything that had transpired, including the conflicts, defeats, and discoveries. Even though I still felt a connection to Reinaldo, the prophecy threatened everything we were constructing, like a shadow that lurked just out of reach. I had a mental image of Emiliano's face. I was still troubled by his tense speech and the agony in his eyes when we last spoke. Then there was Santiago, my father. His dissatisfaction with me and my decisions was nearly intolerable. All the relationships felt broken. Trust was brittle, and I was no longer sure who I could trust. I tried to ignore the overwhelming thoughts by closing my eyes, but they returned with greater vigor. Everything seemed hazy. The future. It was invisible to me, and I felt like I was slipping more and more as I tried to figure it out. Ronaldo's familiar presence filled the room as the door creaked open. I knew it was him without even turning around. Like a stabilizing force in a collapsing world, I could sense him. "Valeria," he uttered softly, "we must speak." With a constricted throat, I nodded. He moved forward and took a seat next to me. The cold that had settled in my chest was repelled by his warmth. At first he remained silent. Neither of us did. The weight of everything unsaid weighed heavily on our silence. Reinaldo broke it at last. The rebellious leader mentioned a prophecy concerning us. I closed my eyes as his words replayed in my head. I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want him to have to deal with it. Now, however, it was out. In actuality, I was unable to continue avoiding it. I said in a barely audible whisper, "I know." With a firm yet gentle grip, his hand found mine. What does it signify? What is stated in this prophecy? I forced myself to look him in the eyes and took a trembling breath. It warns of a vast darkness that, if we don't band together, will engulf both of our packs. Not only our affection, but also the strength of our packs and families. We must unite, but there is a cost. Death, treachery, and sacrifice. Ronaldo's jaw tensed and his face hardened. A cost, he whispered. What does that signify for us? With the prophecy's weight like a vice against my chest, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm not sure. However, the prophecy mentions more than just the packs. It talks about us, our connection. Everything we cherish will be lost if we are unable to come together and overcome whatever is ahead. The final and weighty words lingered in the air. Emotion darkened Ronaldo's eyes, but he remained silent. I could see that he was experiencing the same anxiety and uncertainty that I was. His voice was rough with emotion as he finally said, "I'll protect you. I'll keep our relationship strong, regardless of the price." Instead of reassuring me, his words made me feel frightened. I could sense the responsibility and weight of his pledge. We already had a lot to deal with. How much longer could we stand it? How much more would we have to give up? I had no idea what the answer was. I touched his face with my trembling hand, but as soon as my fingers touched his skin, I was overcome by a vision, with clear, vivid images racing through my head. I witnessed death, destruction, and a future in which darkness engulfed everything I held dear. I gasped and withdrew my hand as my breath caught in my throat. No, I am unable to. With a worried expression on his face, Ronaldo's hand gripped my wrist more tightly. What did you observe? I shook my head in an attempt to get the pictures out of my head, but they persisted and haunted me. I witnessed the destruction of everything we are fighting for. I saw the end of the world. Then, my voice trailed off. I heard a word, just one word. What word? With his eyes searching mine, Ronaldo asked urgently. Choose, I muttered, my voice shaking under the pressure. I have no idea what it means. But Ronaldo, it's like a warning that we might lose everything we're battling for. Ronaldo's face changed, his eyes growing more intense. Valeria, you must tell me everything. This vision, what is it? What does it signify? I was unable to respond. The prophecy, the vision, and the weight of the decisions that were ahead were all too much for my mind to handle, and it was spinning. I said in a barely audible whisper, I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. Ronaldo's thumb lightly brushed my cheek as his face softened. We'll face whatever comes our way together. You don't have to bear this weight by yourself. I wanted to think he was real. Although I wanted to think we could overcome whatever lay ahead, the weight of the decision and the vision felt overwhelming. The fear and uncertainty enveloped me like a blanket as I leaned into him. Even though he kept me close, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that the worst was yet to happen. The single word I had heard in the vision then came back to me: choose. What was the meaning of that word? When the prophecy warned that everything might be doomed, what decision did I have to make, and how could I safeguard everything we had fought for? Even though Ronaldo drew me in, I could still feel our separation. Neither he nor I had the answers. I felt as though I was standing on the brink of an abyss, with no way of knowing what would come next. Would we be able to choose wisely, or would we all be consumed by the darkness? As I closed my eyes and felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on my heart, the questions continued to reverberate in my mind, unanswered. What do I have to decide? Chapter 094, Emiliano's Pove. My mind was racing in a million different directions as I paced back and forth in my quarters. Despite my best efforts to ignore it, Matteo's betrayal still weighed heavily on my chest. But it was more than just the betrayal. There was a deeper problem than I could comprehend. I kept getting caught up in secrets and lies, and every decision I made seemed to take me in a darker direction. My mate and I had an unspoken bond that only served to exacerbate the chaos and feed the fire. I had to find out the truth about this. The truth had to be known to me. I looked up to see my father, Santiago, coming in as the door to my quarters opened. His presence ought to have been consoling, but instead it made my chest constricted. I needed answers to my questions. I had to know his position on this. It was difficult for me to trust him anymore because of his icy manner, but I had to try. If he was associated with the Underworld Council, I had to know. "Father," I said, my voice steady but laden with rage, "we must speak." His face was unreadable as he looked at me. "How about?" "About everything," I shot back, my words piercing. "Concerning the Underworld Council, concerning Mateo, regarding you." His face grew serious. "How about me?" My blood pressure increased. I wasn't going to back down. "Papa, I know you're concealing something. I must know the truth. Do you have any affiliation with the Underworld Council?" He took a while to respond. Rather, he gazed at me as though attempting to determine my level of seriousness. His jaw was tense, and I could see how his eyes darted to the door as if he was debating whether to close it or turn to leave. At last he said something. "Emiliano, you're asking the wrong questions." I retorted, "I'm asking the right ones. I must know what you did. If you have been concealing our family's connections to them, I must know." Santiago's lips formed a thin line as his eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about. We are not affiliated with the Underworld Council." I didn't think he was real, not for a moment. "Father, I'm not a moron." I took a step closer and said, "I know there's more to this than you're letting on. You've always kept a lot to yourself. Why?" His hands were clenched at his sides as he inhaled deeply. "Emiliano, there are things you don't get, things you're not prepared to learn." I said, quietly but firmly, "I'm ready now." "Tell me." He paused, then let out a deep sigh. "The Montoya family does indeed have ties to the Underworld Council. However, it's not what you believe." My heart fell. What is meant by that? After passing me, Santiago went to the window and gazed out at the estate. "It implies that everything we've built and our ascent to power are connected to them. The Montoyas have forged alliances with evil forces for generations. Emiliano, it's the cost of power, the cost of surviving. The ground seemed to have been torn out from under me." "You mean that dark magic has been a part of our family's history for generations?" "Yes," Santiago said softly. "It is the Montoya legacy's secret, and it's what maintains our authority." I was unable to comprehend it. I was having a hard time processing what he was saying. "You've been collaborating with the Underworld Council for a long time?" For the first time, I noticed something like regret in his eyes as they met mine. "Emiliano, I never intended this for you. However, we are unable to reverse the agreement we made. It's too late." "Is it too late?" I muttered. "Too late? What do you mean?" "Emilian, the darkness is approaching," Santiago said in a barely audible voice. "The Underworld Council has never been closer, and we are powerless to stop it." I had trouble breathing. His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. "So, everything I've fought for and everything we've done was based on a lie." He turned his back on me and gazed out the window. "It's not a lie, an agreement, and that agreement is now on its way to collect." I froze, as the truth of what he was saying finally dawned on me. My legacy and my family were all connected to the Underworld Council. We were powerless. No escape. My thoughts were interrupted by Santiago's voice. "Emiliano, you have to realize something. Everything, including this, was never intended to endure. Our power is coming at a cost, and we are being pursued by the Underworld Council." A shiver went through me. "What do you say? What does this signify for us?" With a tense voice, Santiago stated, "It means that everything we've built is at risk, and it implies that you must choose. A decision? Which option?" The ground seemed to be slipping away from me. I had no idea how to stop my world's entire foundation from collapsing. With dark eyes that were filled with an incomprehensible heaviness, Santiago turned to face me. "Emiliano, you are this family's future. Additionally, you must choose the future you wish to have. As we have always done, would you like to embrace the darkness, or do you resist it?" For a long time, I was unable to speak as the words lingered in the air. What was my option? What should I have done? My voice broke as I said, I don't know what to do." With a softer tone, Santiago stated, "You don't have to make a decision right now. However, the moment is approaching, and you'll have to make a decision when it does. Furthermore, there won't be any turning back." My thoughts were racing as I stood there and stared at him. Everything I believed to be true about myself and my family had been completely contradicted. For me, what did this mean? For the legacy of Montoya? For the future? And what would happen if we were eventually pursued by the Underworld Council? I had no idea. However, I was certain of one thing. I was on the brink of something much more sinister than I could have ever dreamed. All I had to do was choose to fight or fall into it. Chapter 095, Reinaldo's Pove. I felt like I was being choked by the weight of everything. I stood at the window and gazed out at the far horizon, where the last rays of sunlight were disappearing. Every day seemed darker than the one before, as if the world were closing in. There were enemies inside and outside my pack. Every choice I made seemed to be influenced by the prophecy, which I couldn't get out of my head. I felt more burdened than ever by the responsibility I had to my people and the weight of the crown. Then there was Valeria. The only thing that kept me rooted was her love and her connection to me. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to ignore the darkness that loomed over her. The idea of striking a deal with the Underworld Council felt all but inevitable as their hold grew stronger. "Reinaldo," a voice interrupted me. Startled, I turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. I didn't recognize the messenger. His face was pale, and he appeared anxious. He held out a small scroll sealed with an ancient, strange emblem and said, "There's a message for you." Despite my hesitation, I took it and broke the seal. My heart fell as I unfolded the parchment. I believed the old ally who sent it had passed away years ago. The words on the page were anything but consoling, but the writing was familiar. The message made clear that the Underworld Council was controlling the Vargas and Montoya Pack's destiny by influencing events. Their ability to control the very lives of those they aimed to subjugate came from magic, specifically dark magic, rather than just using physical force. What's the worst? To increase their power, they were playing us off one another and controlling both families. The message continued by saying that I would need to strike a dark bargain if I wished to shield my pack from the Council's influence. Give up something or someone. There was nothing else to do. The scroll shook in my hand as I stood there. Make a sacrifice. I kept hearing the word. I was no longer able to ignore it. This was the final battle for the survival of my pack. I went to look for Valeria. She was necessary to me. More than ever, I needed her. She was sitting by the window in her room, looking off into space. I could sense the tension in her even though she didn't look up when I walked in. She was aware of the problem. Both of us did. "What's going on, Reinaldo?" she said softly. "I sense it. There will be something soon. You're not telling me everything. I know that." I approached her and knelt next to her. She needed to know, but I didn't want to involve her in this because she didn't deserve to carry this burden. I said in a low voice that was hardly audible, "The Underworld Council is playing us both. They have been controlling everything, including our fates and packs, by using magic to manipulate us. And striking a deal with them is the only way to keep us safe." With her hands shaking in mine, she shook her head. "No, you can't. Reinaldo, we can't rely on them. So much has already been destroyed by them. How would you go about negotiating with them?" I was ripped apart by the crack in her voice. Although I had previously witnessed this fear in her, it was now more intense and genuine. With my voice breaking, I said, "I don't know if I have any choice left. Everything we've worked for will be destroyed by the Underworld Council if we don't. They will rip us to pieces." "Then give it a shot!" Valeria got to her feet and yelled, "Reinaldo, I won't allow you to sell your soul. You're better than this. We are superior to this. There must be an alternative." With my heart racing, I got to my feet as well. "Valeria, what other option do you have? Since we are already losing, is there any other option?" We were unwilling to compromise, and the tension between us hung heavy in the air. We were now too far apart to comprehend one another, but I could see the anguish in her eyes, the same anguish I was experiencing. She said, gently but firmly, "I won't let you do this. Even if it's the only way to save us, I don't care. We are on par with the Underworld Council if you agree to this agreement. I refuse to watch you ruin all that we have worked so hard to achieve." With my chest constricted, I gazed at her. I muttered, "I don't know what else to do." The words didn't sound as strong as I had hoped. In all honesty, I had no idea how to avert the impending darkness. If defending my pack meant losing myself, how could I do it? Valeria took a step forward and looked into my eyes. "I have no idea what this prophecy means, but I do know that we will fight. We don't bargain with monsters. Reinaldo, we fight." I couldn't bring myself to say the words again, even though they were burning in my chest. I wasn't sure if we could fight this. I wasn't sure if we would prevail. At that moment, a shadow emerged from the doorway, someone I never imagined seeing again. He was my mentor, the person who had taught me how to be the alpha I was all those years ago. He was different now, though. His energy was dark and incomprehensible to me. Magic, and not the healing or protective kind. This type of magic was destructive. "Reinaldo, you've been anticipating me," he said in a chilly, disinterested tone. I was stunned as I stood there. How did he end up here? After all this time, and why did he appear to be encircled by the very magic I was attempting to stay away from? "What brings you here?" With a strained voice, I finally managed to ask. He moved forward, and I felt a chill go through me as his intense gaze met mine. "I have a solution for you. A way out of the mess you're in." Valeria's hand tightened around mine, but I kept my eyes off her. I couldn't. I had to pay attention to what was going on. "And what is that?" I asked in a low voice, but my heart was racing. "Make the deal," he said in a tone that was almost too composed. "It's the sole option. Do you wish to keep your pack? The cost will then be borne by you. Nobody knows that better than you." The words were like a kick to the stomach. What did he say? Was this the correct response? Valeria took a step forward, looking pale. "No," she firmly stated. "This isn't the solution." I was unable to even look at her. My voice broke as I whispered, "I don't know what to do anymore." The dark silhouette of my mentor approached. "Reinaldo, it's easy. If you don't make the deal, everything you hold dear will burn down. The stakes are known to you. You are aware of the cost." The words weighed heavily on me. I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what lay ahead, and I found myself at a crossroads. What was it he wanted from me? How far would I go to keep my pack safe? Worst of all, how much would it cost me to save them? Chapter 096. Valeria's Pove. I was confused as I made my way through the Montoya estate's halls. I felt as though the weight of everything that had transpired was dragging me down with each step. Reinaldo and I were getting farther apart, and it seemed like something was getting farther away every day. The prophecy was constantly on my mind, looming over me like a black cloud and casting doubt on everything I did. What if the future we fought for didn't materialize? What if we had already lost everything we had worked so hard to achieve? I had to get my thoughts straight. I therefore made the decision to speak with Emiliano. Even though everything else was crumbling, he was the one person I felt I could still rely on. I discovered him sitting by the fireplace in the library, staring off into space. His eyes softened when he saw me, but they also had a weight to them that reflected my emotions. "Emiliano," I said quietly as I approached him, "I must speak with you." With a serious expression, he nodded. "What are you thinking about?" I sat down next to him and said, "I don't know. Everything seems off. I'm not the same as Reinaldo. We are getting farther apart, and I keep having the impression that the prophecy is going to engulf everything we value." Emiliano took a while to reply. His eyes were unreadable as he simply gazed at me. There was a long silence before he spoke. "I discovered something," he muttered. "I think you should know something." A beat skipped in my chest. "What do you mean?" Emiliano paused, seemingly considering what he was going to say. "It has to do with Father. I have discovered some information regarding his interactions with the Underworld Council." I felt sick to my stomach. For a moment, I was unable to breathe. "What are you discussing?" He went on, his voice tense. "I've been digging, Valeria. For many years, Father has been active with the Underworld Council. I have proof, but he has kept it a secret. Our family has held on to power for so long because of a deal he struck with them." Emiliano's words struck me like a tidal wave, and I felt as though the room was closing in on me. My father, the only person I believed I could trust, and my family had ties to the very evil forces we were battling. I was unable to comprehend it. "You mean our whole family is bound to them?" My question was hardly audible above a whisper. With dark eyes from the weight of the truth, Emiliano nodded. "Indeed, there's more. I've managed to reverse it. However, it's risky. We might lose everything as a result." My heart pounded. "Can you undo it? How? Was it possible to escape something so sinister?" "What do you mean?" My voice trembled as I asked. "How can we reverse it?" Emiliano looked at me painedly and said, It's not simple. But I've discovered a way to break the agreement, a ritual. However, there is a cost. Everything we've built could be destroyed. The council will retaliate. They won't simply let us go. My chest constricted. My mind was all over the place. So what should we do? Do we simply accept it? Do we allow Father's bargain to govern us indefinitely? Emiliano took a while to respond. He looked away, obviously thinking of something else. At last, his voice was low as he spoke again. I'm not sure. However, we cannot allow them to rule us. The Underworld Council cannot determine our destiny. I got up and started to pace the room. However, what if breaching the agreement results in total loss? What happens if the cost is excessive? Emiliano spoke in a cool but firm tone. We must assume that risk. If we don't, they will continue to manipulate us like puppets. I turned to face him and stopped pacing. I'm not sure if I can pull this off. I'm not sure if I can turn on Father. He is a member of our family. Emiliano's voice cut through my thoughts as he said, He's already betrayed us, Valeria. Even if it means causing harm to those we care about, we must break free. A lump started to grow in my throat. The Underworld Council was no longer the only topic of discussion. It was about everything I had ever known, my legacy and my family. Even if my father had struck a bargain with monsters, how could I possibly consider severing our relationship? I muttered, I'm not sure if I can. I'm not sure if I can handle the fallout. Emiliano got up and moved toward me. You don't need to make a decision right now. However, the truth is out. We cannot disregard it. We must choose the future we desire, either a future devoid of their influence or one in which we remain under their sway. His words struck me like a hammer. I was aware that he was correct. I knew I had to make a decision. However, I felt as though everything was falling apart, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to survive. I was about to say something when there was a loud crash. I turned rapidly as my breath caught in my throat and my heart stopped. The room's door flew open, revealing an unfamiliar figure standing in the doorway. His presence chilled me, and the air around him crackled with dark magic. The figure's voice was icy and threatening as he said, You've come too close to the truth. As the figure moved forward, his dark magic swirling around him, I felt the blood drain from my face. The air was heavy with danger, and the room felt like it was closing in. What are you looking for? I tried to sound steady, but my voice was trembling as I demanded. The figure took a while to respond. Rather, a dark smile slipped across his lips as his eyes narrowed. His voice was low and menacing as he said, I'm here to remind you of what happens when you get too close. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. This was the work of the Underworld Council. They were present and would not allow us to escape. Now what? Emiliano's voice was tense as he asked. The figure grinned more broadly. We now complete the task you began. My heart thumped in my chest. By that, what did he mean? And how far would the Underworld Council go to protect their secrets? I stood motionless as the questions whirled around in my head without any answers. How much danger did we actually face now? How far would the Council go to keep us quiet? Chapter 97. Emiliano's Pove. As I strolled around the Montoya Pack's outer grounds, the wind whipped through my hair, and the chilly air pricked my skin. But my thoughts were much colder than the night air. I felt as though I was being drawn further and further into a web of deceit, betrayal, and lies with each step I took. Knowing the sinister reality of my father's agreement with the Underworld Council was something I had never desired. However, it felt like a burden I couldn't get rid of now that I knew. What had I gotten myself into? The future became increasingly uncertain with each step, and every choice seemed to lead to a darker path. Now what could I possibly do? My commitment to my blood and family was being put to the test, and the results of my decision would be felt for the rest of my life. I knew it wouldn't be a straightforward conversation when Father summoned me. Santiago's abrupt request for me to meet him felt like the quiet before a storm because he had been aloof, even cold. He was sitting there looking as stern and icy as ever when I finally made it to the private rooms. When I walked in, he didn't even raise his head. You desired to see me? I asked, attempting to avoid sounding resentful. With a flat, controlled voice, Santiago said, Sit down, Emiliano. After some hesitation, I sat across from him and waited for him to say something, my eyes narrowing. The tension was heavy and oppressive, and I could feel it in the air. He started, his eyes finally locking with mine. I've been thinking. Regarding the Montoya family's future. In addition, the Vargas pack. I got a chill when the Vargas pack was brought up. We were getting more involved with Reinaldo than I ever wanted. Whether I liked it or not, I had to accept that our packs were bound together in this battle. How about them? With a cautious tone, I asked. For a brief instant, Santiago's eyes softened before hardening once more. A partnership, using the Vargas pack to confront the Underworld Council collectively. Bewildered, I blinked. What are you discussing? You have never desired to interact with them. That was before, he said in a tone that was unusually solemn. The Council is becoming more and more influential. They need our strength, and we need theirs. The only way to preserve our legacy is to do this. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Reinaldo was being offered an alliance by father to the pack of Vargas? After all that had transpired? You think I'll just accept this? I asked, my words laced with disbelief. After everything that has transpired between us, the treachery, the falsehoods? With a chilly tone once more, Santiago stated, I don't expect you to agree with me. However, you will, for the benefit of this family. I wasn't prepared for the depth of his words. And Father, what's in it for you? My voice quivered with a mixture of frustration and rage as I asked, what is the true cause of your abrupt change in attitude? He didn't recoil. Emiliano, it's not about me. It's about safeguarding our future, the future of our family, and working together with the Vargas pack is the only way to accomplish that. There is nothing else we can do. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. You're requesting that I abandon all of my beliefs, to reach agreements with those accountable for all of the mishaps in our lives. His voice grew icier as he remarked, you're not seeing the bigger picture. You believe I desired this? Emiliano, you don't always have a choice. For the sake of the greater good, sacrifice is sometimes necessary. I gazed at him, my mind racing. What about the reality? How about the agreement? How about the council of the underworld? Santiago's fists clenched at his sides as his eyes hardened once more. Our history is the pact. We remained in power because of it. We can't simply ignore it. But I don't want to keep it, I said in a firm yet low voice. I no longer wish to live under the Underworld Council's shadow. I want to get away from them. You believe it's that easy? Now, Santiago's voice cut through the atmosphere with a sharp edge. You believe we can simply abandon everything we've established? What sacrifices has our family made? You are unaware of the repercussions of that decision. I understand enough, I said as I got to my feet. My chest was thumping with my heart. I refuse to be a member of a family that is associated with them. No longer. Santiago got up, his expression contorted in annoyance. You're doing something wrong. You will come to regret this. I took a step back and shook my head. Maybe I will. However, I would rather regret that than continue to live with the lies you have used to create this family. My father's voice interrupted me as I was about to walk away. Emiliano, you have no other option. You will follow my instructions if you wish to maintain your position in this family. There isn't another option. His words weighed heavily on me as I stood there for a while. So I suppose I no longer belong here. My heart heaving from the reality of what I had just discovered, I departed. Everything I knew about my family was being ripped apart, including the secrets and the lies. I had to make a decision that went beyond Reinaldo and the Vargas pack. It concerned the Montoya legacy's whole future. And as I got to the door, I heard something, a snap of bones, a crackling. My instincts kicked in and the room's door flew open before I could react. A rogue wolf entered the room, its eyes gleaming with an unearthly light. It wasn't isolated. More came after, their growls resonating through the atmosphere. I pulled out my weapon, prepared to defend myself, but the rogue wolf's eyes were fixed on me. It came at me with frightful speed, its eyes full of hate, its teeth bared. I was suddenly struck with the realization that the Underworld Council was well informed. They had been observing everything we did. I narrowly avoided the rogue wolf's attack as it lunged at me. As I fought to maintain my balance, my heart thumped in my chest. What was it I was supposed to do for the Underworld Council? Why were they specifically aiming for me? As the rogue wolf circled, its glowing eyes staring at me, the questions rushed through my head. This wasn't a haphazard assault. It was a personal matter. And as I prepared for another attack, I came to the terrible realization that I was fighting for more than just my family. I was battling for my life. What was in store for me from the Underworld Council? And what lengths would they go to ensure that I remained under their control? I had no idea. I was going to find out, though. Chapter 98, Ronaldo's Pove. With everything bearing down on me, I stood by myself in my study. I felt as though the walls were closing in on me. Nothing felt heavier than the weight of my family's legacy as my fingers moved over the edges of an old book with worn pages. The prophecy, Malik Blackthorn's rogue wolves, and the Underworld Council were all drawing me into a sinister world for which I wasn't sure I was prepared. What should I have done? I felt like I was getting farther away from who I believed I could be every day, even though my pack needed me. Valeria and I had a close relationship that had become strained. Never in my life had I felt so conflicted. I couldn't bear the consequences of my decisions. I had to choose between fighting for freedom, fighting for the pack, or accepting the power they gave me and possibly losing myself in the process. The appearance of a shadow at the doorway interrupted my thoughts. When I turned, I saw a messenger with a worried, pale face. "Ronaldo," he said in a tense tone, "I have a message for you." He handed me a sealed scroll, and I nodded, hardly listening. A feeling of dread crept up my spine as I broke the seal. My heart fell when I read the message. I had feared that the Underworld Council would make the offer. An agreement. Unimaginable power in return for my pack's and the Montoya pack's allegiance. The temptation was irresistible, but the cost was high. They assured me that they would grant me authority over my adversaries, particularly Malik Blackthorn and his renegade wolves. I would, however, bind myself and my pack to their will in exchange. I was having trouble breathing. Every word on that page was a temptation and a poison. I had to fight it, though. Did I not? The pull was too strong for me to resist. Power seemed to be hovering just outside my grasp, waiting for me. But at what price? My spirit? My pack? Valeria? In an attempt to steady my shaking hands, I folded the letter slowly. I struggled to balance my love for Valeria with the temptation of power. The faces of my people, my pack, echoed in my mind along with her warnings. I muttered to myself, "You can't just do this." What was the other option, though? The Underworld Council would keep gaining more control over everything I valued if I did nothing. The decision was not simple, just the price of the choice, and it came at a high price. Too high. Suddenly the door opened. Valeria was standing in the doorway when I turned around, her face white and worried. She must have sensed my internal conflict and the pressure of the choice I was having to make. "Ronaldo," she said quietly as she entered the room. "What's happening?" I sensed that something is off. With a heavy heart, I gazed at her. She knew me better than anyone else and was the only person I could trust. I was afraid, though, even with her. I was afraid of what lay ahead and what might occur if I made a poor decision. "I received an offer from the Underworld Council," I said quietly. "Power. Command in return for allegiance. Our allegiance." Her eyes widened, and I could feel the fear piercing my soul. "No," she muttered. "Ronaldo, you can't rely on them. Everything will be destroyed by them. You are unable to negotiate with them." "I understand," I said, my voice cracking. "But what if there's nothing I can do? What if there is no other way to keep us all safe?" "No," she exclaimed, taking a step forward. "Ronaldo, there's always another way. We are unable to give ourselves to them. This power cannot be subdued. It will devour us." I grabbed her hands as I reached out. "Valeria, I don't know what else I can do. The stakes are excessively high. If we don't defend ourselves, the Underworld Council will destroy us. I don't know what the right choice is anymore." Her eyes were filled with pain as she looked up at me. "The decision that keeps us free is always the right one. Keep them from winning. Keep everything we have fought for from being taken away by this darkness." Her words were a lifesaver. However, it was very difficult for me to think clearly because of the temptation and the pull of the power in my hands. Could I say no? Would I lose everything if I rejected the Council's offer? For a moment, all I could see in Valeria's eyes was fear. In that one look, the depth of her love for me was so clear. Her anxieties also served as a reminder of my potential losses. What if refusing is more expensive than we can afford? My voice was hardly more than a whisper as I asked. She moved forward, staring at me so intently that it seemed as though time had stopped. Ronaldo, we're facing it together, regardless. However, we don't bargain with monsters. It hurt what she said. I needed to hear those words, and they were the right ones. However, the council's offer persisted, and I was unable to reject it. It was nearly impossible to resist the temptation. With my voice trembling, I said, I'm not sure if I can win this battle without them, but I'm risking everything if I make this deal. Our future, our connection. Valeria's hands cupped my face as her face softened. Ronaldo, you are in charge of this pack. You're not by yourself. You don't have to make this decision by yourself. I agree with you. But as the words took hold, the ground beneath us shook. Although this had happened before, the force behind it was different this time, more aggressive, more living. Abruptly, a chilly, well-known voice reverberated through the atmosphere. It said, Ronaldo, you cannot fight us indefinitely. There is a cost to power. You will soon discover the exact amount you are prepared to pay. The blood in my veins turned to ice as I froze. That voice, it made me shiver. Who is that? Breathing heavily, I whispered. Valeria's eyes widened in terror as she looked around. What's going on, Ronaldo? With a tone full of malice, the voice went on. Time is running out for you. Power comes at a cost, and you will soon discover the cost. My heart was pounding, and I could sense the words' impact. What was it they wanted from me? Why were they interested in me? Valeria had a worried expression on her face when I looked down at her. She was correct. I was unable to negotiate with them. However, I could still feel the temptation tugging at me. I also became aware of how close the Underworld Council was to stealing everything I held dear while I was standing there. How would I respond? How would we respond? Once again, the ground shook beneath us, and I was certain that I would not be able to avoid the council indefinitely. I would have to confront them sooner or later. However, when? How much does it cost? I wasn't certain. I was going to find out, though. Chapter 099, Valeria's POV. The garden of the Montoya estate was illuminated by the moon, creating long, unsettling shadows. Standing at the edge, I gazed at the withering flowers below, their fragile petals crushed under the weight of something from which I was unable to flee. As the prophecy hung over me, I kept thinking about how much the Underworld Council's power was growing. I felt like I was getting closer to a fate I wasn't prepared to face with each passing moment. Nothing felt secure anymore, not even my legacy, my family, or the things I had once trusted. And our relationship was deteriorating, Ronaldo. I had the impression that I was gradually losing everything I held dear, and there was nothing I could do about it. In an attempt to quiet the raging storm inside my chest, I closed my eyes and took a trembling breath. But the darkness was too real, too near. As the council's influence grew stronger every day, I began to question how long my family would be able to withstand the impending storm. I walked back toward the estate, avoiding the garden. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was prepared to find them. I needed to know the truth about my family's history and the evil that had long been concealed. I saw it then, a hidden door, tucked away behind a tapestry in the hall. I had never noticed it before, but it had always been there. I pushed the door open out of curiosity and discovered a room that had been closed off for decades. The flickering candlelight hardly lit the shadowy nooks and crannies, and the air was heavy with dust. The room was filled with dark magic rituals, cursed artifacts, and ancient scrolls. As I moved deeper into the room and looked at the shelves brimming with knowledge that was prohibited, a chill went down my spine. The realization of the truth made my heart race in my chest. My family had been concealing the link between the dark magic that could devour us all and the Underworld Council. The very thing could destroy us was the foundation of our legacy. Reaching for one of the scrolls, I took a step forward. I felt a weird energy surge through me the instant my fingers touched it. I was drawn into a world of shadows by a clear, vivid vision. A tall, cloaked figure stood at the estate's gates, observing me with icy eyes. As the vision dimmed, I felt a chill and gasped for air. My heart pounding, I glanced around. What was going on? Who was that person? I could no longer deny the reality. The very darkness we were attempting to flee was connected to my family's past. I could now sense the Underworld Council's influence in every aspect of our lives after they had been controlling us all and exploiting us to acquire power. I was forced to face it. I had to confront my family's transformation and what we had permitted to occur. The ground shook as I stood there, trying to take in the significance of what I had found. A pulse of dark energy seemed to vibrate through the walls. Then I suddenly felt a rush of energy that threw me into a trance. I was drawn into the same dim world as before, and my vision became blurry. I found myself in front of the head of the Underworld Council this time, a menacing presence. He gazed down at me, his eyes glimmering with dark power. "Valeria Montoya, you've learned too much," he said in a smooth, icy voice. "Your bond with Reinaldo is the key to unlocking an ancient curse that will either save or destroy them all. It is more than just a mate bond." I went cold. The curse. Though not in such detail, I had heard rumors about it. "What do you mean?" With a trembling voice, I managed to ask. "Reinaldo and you share a bond that is connected to a force that you cannot comprehend. That bond will either break the curse or release it when the time comes, devouring everything in its path. And you," he hesitated, his grin growing gloomy, "you have to make the decision." His words weighed heavily on my chest, causing my heart to race. Did I really have the power to put an end to this? Or would I be the one who set it free? The vision broke before I could say anything, and I jolted back to the present. My body was shaking from the effects of the dark magic I had just experienced, and I was breathing shallowly. However, I wasn't by myself. When I saw Reinaldo standing in the doorway, I turned quickly and my heart stopped. I could see the suspicion in his eyes, even though they were full of worry. "Valeria, what did you find?" His voice was low and reserved as he asked. Unsure of how to respond to him, I stood there frozen. How could I explain what I had discovered to him? How could I explain to him the curse, the connection that could make or break us? Reinaldo took a step toward me and looked into my eyes. "What's happening, Valeria? Lately you have been aloof. I sense it. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. What if I informed him? What if telling him the truth costs him? What if everything was at stake?" His hand brushed my arm as he reached out, jerking me out of my reverie. "Tell me," he demanded in a gentle yet firm tone. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper, "I found something. I learned the truth about our family's agreement with the Underworld Council. Everything is connected to us, my relationship with you. Reinaldo, we hold the secret to lifting a curse that has the power to either save or ruin us all." Reinaldo's face turned pale, his expression changing from one of worry to one of surprise. His voice cracked slightly as he asked, "What are you talking about?" His fear and incredulity were palpable to me, but I was unable to contain myself any longer. "Reinaldo, we're stuck. For generations, the Underworld Council has been taking advantage of and controlling us. Furthermore, the curse connected to our bond is stronger than we can comprehend." There was a heavy, oppressive silence between us. Reinaldo took a step back, his eyes wide with fear and bewilderment. With his voice shaking under the weight of what I had disclosed, he stated, "We need to find a way to stop this." The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say them. What if everything was lost, if the bond and the curse were broken? Would I take that chance? Would he? A loud crashing sound reverberated through the hallways before I could say anything. Startled by the sound, we both turned. The door suddenly flew open, revealing a figure I recognized, someone I had assumed I would never see again, standing there, surrounded by shadow. The Underworld Council's leader. His icy grin chilled me to the bone. With a tone full of hate, he declared, "You've come too close to the truth. But now it's too late. Your decision has already been made." I could see the fear in Reinaldo's eyes, even though his hand automatically went to the weapon by his side. It was this. It was the moment we had been dreading. What were they hoping to get out of us? And how much longer could we keep fighting before the Underworld Council claimed what they had been waiting for all along? It was getting dark. Furthermore, we had no way of knowing if we could stop it. Now what would happen to us? Would the Council finally get what they wanted, or would we escape the curse? Chapter 100. Emiliano's Pove. As I strolled through the forest that surrounded the Montoya estate, the chilly night air pricked my skin. My thoughts were rushing through my head faster than my feet could keep up with them. My father's sinister secrets, Mateo's treachery, and the increasing power of the Underworld Council all seemed too much to handle. The mayhem seemed to draw me farther into a place from which I had no idea how to get out with each step I took. I no longer knew which way to go. I was starting to doubt my long-held belief that family loyalty was crucial. It was the most difficult decision I had ever had to make, and I could feel it eating away at me all the time. As I ventured farther into the forest in search of the solitude that only the woods could provide, the trees murmured above me. However, there was no tranquility. Not right now. Not when everything is falling apart. Then someone emerged from the darkness, Mateo. I came to a complete halt. Why had he come here? Why now, after all this? Emiliano, he said in a raw, remorseful voice. I must speak with you. I was hardly able to talk. After what he had done, what could I possibly say to him? The lies and the betrayal were too painful to even comprehend. He had abandoned me and us after I had put all my trust in him. His hands shaking, he took a step closer. I am aware of your anger. I don't hold it against you, but listen to me, please. I narrowed my eyes and crossed my arms. Coming here after everything shows a lot of nerve. Mateo winced but did not retreat. Emiliano, I didn't want to do it. I had no other option. I was threatened with death by the Underworld Council. They threatened to kill everyone I cared about unless I joined them. A chill went through my body. So, in order to survive, you betrayed me and everyone else? I had no other option. Mateo's voice broke. I took this action to keep you and Valeria the pack safe. I was promised power to keep you all safe. I couldn't watch helplessly as the council ruined everything. Stunned, I stood there. His words were too fast for my brain to process. So you believed that the only option was to join them? You believed that by remaining loyal to them, you can keep us safe? I apologize, Emiliano, Mateo said, his eyes brimming with pain. I didn't want to keep this from you. However, I promise that I was coerced into it. I need your assistance now. The Council's authority is only increasing. We are not alone in stopping them. My chest constricted as I took a step back. You ought to have approached me earlier. We had the option to fight together or find a different strategy. Mateo muttered, I understand. However, I had no idea to whom else to turn. I couldn't let you go. I couldn't let Valeria go. I couldn't lose everything. His remarks were like a kick to the stomach. I wanted to yell at him and tell him how much he had betrayed and destroyed, but I was stopped by something in his eyes. Like me, he was broken. With a trembling voice, I said, You should have trusted me. We had the option to fight this. Together we could have stood. You could have relied on me. Mateo pleaded, I know. However, the council, Emiliano, they've done something to me. It's more than just a partnership. There's more to it. I was marked by them. I froze and looked at him. Marked you? What on earth does that mean? Mateo showed me a scar across his chest as he lifted his shirt, his hands shaking. The dark, jagged mark looked as if it had been burnt into his skin. What is this? My voice was hardly audible as I whispered. Mateo muttered, This is the binding mark. It's their magic. Their blood is now linked to mine. I am unable to avoid it. His words weighed heavily on me, and I stood motionless, my heart pounding. You're obligated to them? Forever? Mateo's voice broke as he said, Not forever, but for the time being. Emiliano, I had no other option. I apologize. I put us all in danger because I wanted to keep you safe. Overwhelmed, I staggered back. My head was spinning. Mateo and our family were under the Underworld Council's control, and it was worse than I could have ever imagined. My own and my family's histories were intertwined. The truth hit me hard. To what extent did this go? How far back was this connection? I looked at Mateo, my anger turning to confusion. For us, what does this mean? For myself? For Valeria? For the group? Mateo said in a low but determined voice, We have to stop them. There's a way out. However, we must breach the agreement. And I am aware that it will be risky. I have no idea how much it will cost us. However, it's the only option. My thoughts were racing as I shook my head. How? How can we break it? Mateo acknowledged, I don't know all the details. However, we must work together. We cannot defeat them on our own. The council has too much power. My mind was racing as I gazed at him. How could we proceed? How could we oppose something so strong and ingrained in our existence? And what if everything was lost, if the agreement was broken? The night was suddenly broken by a howl. It was a strange, icy sound that seemed to reverberate from the very center of the forest. My heart thumping, I froze. What was that? Mateo's eyes were wide with terror as he whispered. The ground shook under our feet before I could respond. A shadow passed through the darkness too quickly, and the trees trembled. Out of the shadows came twisted, strange figures. Dark magic glowed in the eyes of rogue wolves under the Underworld Council's control. They were present. I exhaled, clearly terrified. They're here. They're here to get us. Mateo was standing next to me, his posture rigid. This is it. This is the last test they will take. My blood was getting cold. Not just anybody was the target of the rogue wolves' presence. They supported me. I took a step back and pulled out my gun. My mind was racing. Was this a test from the council, or were they coming to get their price at last? The wolves' growls filled the air as their gazes were fixed on me. There was no way out. What was it I was supposed to do for the Underworld Council? What made me the target? And could I make it through what lay ahead? The wolves were approaching, and the answers were not entirely clear.